and dangers are averted. What exactly are we talking about in our publication? And it's going to be 7 points. First, a one-size-fits-all European Union increasingly looks like a distant dream. An ever closer union is more fever than ever. Flexible integration will shape the Europe of the future. We test to the limit the motto of the European Union, united in diversity, in varietate concordia, zjednoczeni w rozmaitości. If we handle the new dynamics well, however, we can get for European Union a new lease of life with reformed Eurozone, Schengen, or PESCO. Second, comparatively recent technologies have a darker side that we are struggling to understand and harness. What would you do if the chair that you are sitting on suddenly started moving and made you fall to the ground? Or your kettle scorched you with hot water, as if operated by some remote control? Well, it happens that the tools that we make daily use of, like social media, are being used as weapons against us, to rob us, to create confusion, to shake our beliefs in what is really true. Third, multilateralism is becoming a bad word. It comes as a surprise. Think of all the benefits of the rule-based system. Non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, the Montreal Protocol, the International Criminal Court, the G20 base erosion and profit shifting package, to name just a handful. A new era seems to be dawning, one of ineffectual organizations, global imbalances, disinterested or selfish main stakeholders. We increasingly live in a garden from which the gardeners are gone, and weeds are growing, and wolves are on the prowl. Fourth point, the West is being ideologically besieged by countries and non-state actors alike. The goal of these entities is not the West's downfall, maybe, but rather a slow and steady erosion of status. The attack takes many forms: cyber, terrorism, economic pressure, military buildup. Our own inventions or freedoms or values are being used against us. Think of Twitter and social media as a weapon against democracy and freedom of speech. And there is no common response on the part of us, the West. Imagine a family whose members bicker over trifling matters, waste time on mutual recriminations, shout abuse at each other, while a burglar is breaking into a house, and the roof is leaking while the rain is pouring down. Fifth, the global security relations are more and more confrontational. It's beginning to look like a boxing ring. What is worse, the referee is nowhere to be seen, and nobody is checking whether boxers are punching below the waist or carry a hidden knife. It does not help that new technologies are really so disruptive. The world's military history is full of these moments of rapid and disruptive moments, change. At one time in history, the use of gunpowder made all the castles, ramparts, forts obsolete. At another time, closer to today, blitzkrieg with fighter planes and tanks made trenches and cavalry totally useless. Today, it is artificial intelligence, 3D printing, that will shape the conflicts and wars of tomorrow. Sixth, ungoverned cyberspace provides fertile ground for conflict. Every 40 seconds, a business falls victim to a ransomware attack. In a few months' time, it will be 14 seconds. Almost 4 billion people use the internet, and the numbers are growing. And the sphere is not policed properly because there are no proper international laws. And these laws are difficult to negotiate with the likes of Russia and China. There is also the need to preserve the freedom of speech. Last and most important, Central and Eastern Europe is at its most vulnerable and fragile since 1989. The great strides that the region has made since the Cold War, end of Cold War, cannot be taken for granted anymore. Internally, despite successful catch-up, clement economic weather, the discontents are bubbling up. The EU is less of a magnet. East-West divisions are coming back. And with that, the sense of common destiny is lost. Externally, clouds are gathering as well. Allies are wavering, or at least becoming self-absorbed. Ladies and gentlemen, 7 trends can become easily the 7 deadly sins of the West if we fail to react in a proper manner. We as GLOBSEC have ideas how to do it. You will find them in this booklet, Megatrends 2018, available in the main building. Thank you very much for your attention.
Jakob, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Gowing. Some of you will have seen me here before. But my job is really to pick up the spirit of what we heard from the President and from Foreign Minister Lajčák, the President of the UN General Assembly. Some of those issues about innovation, about thinking differently. What should we have been thinking about this time last year, which has happened in the last 12 months? We've got 30 minutes to brainstorm this. This is not a gimmick. This is actually aimed at trying to work out what else should be on the agenda. It's difficult enough organizing a conference and trying to be prescriptive and think about this over weeks and months of planning. But the world is moving so fast. Look at what's happening with Korea. Is the summit on or off? Is this falling apart? So this is the spirit of what we want to do, literally in the next 30 minutes. If you don't have any ideas, it'll be shorter. But at the moment, we're planning on ending it at 1:15. But pick up some of those critical issues that certainly Minister Lajčák, President Lajčák has said, the President of the General Assembly has said about think differently, experiment as well. And that means experimenting in thinking about what security is. I'm not going to try and prescribe anything to you, but what I want to do first of all is get you thinking. We are going to be interactive, but I'm going to use microphones here. We've got 4 microphones for the next 30 minutes. So it is about using your hand, your mouth, and your brain to get stuff over as quickly as possible. We'll try and capture as much as we can. We're interactive online as well. And during the next 24 hours, 48 hours, you will also be able to use your keypad, whatever pad you have. So let's log on to Slido, please. We're not going to use it this time, but I want to use it in a moment just to test. Here it is. Join the conversation. Use the GLOBSEC Slido.com. Go to Slido.com and enter the event code #GLOBSEC 2018. I'd like to test that in a moment with one thing which will help us get the brainstorming going. Now, there's an additional twist here. As we've just heard from the chairman, there are now 3 venues like this. This is massively bigger than the last few years, and there are 2 others as well. So when you're filling something in, make sure you put on which location you're in. This is the Danube space, and if you're lost here, the Danube is there. So that should help you work out which location you're in. So that's how we can relate to you as moderators. You can relate to us. We can hear what you're thinking without actually you having to raise your voice. So let me just test that if I can. Let's try a test poll, because certainly from the President, we've heard the way in which he is viewing it. We've just heard from Jakob as well, the 7 points. How are you feeling? Are you feeling optimistic? Are you feeling pessimistic? That's perhaps the wrong word. Are you negative? Are you positive? If you can, get out your handset, your iPad, your iPhone, whatever you want, and let's try and work out which way you're thinking. One, by the way, is it's time to go on a long holiday and feel pessimistic. This is about being optimistic. Of course, you're a random selection, and I don't know what statistical importance this gives us, except perhaps this, that probably none of you are sure. So let's see it in that spirit. Later on, I want to do a word cloud as well. So think from the kind of discussions we're going to have. Think about the kind of word or two that we can put up there, because this has to frame the next 48 hours, the kind of thing which will underpin your thinking. You've had almost an hour of people talking from here now, so it's time for you to engage. And the word cloud is going to be, which global challenge is the most underrated? That unexpected that we heard from Minister Lajčák. The unthinkables, which frankly should be being thought about at the moment. Let's open the floor. Who's got the microphone? Where are the microphones, please? 1, 2, 3. Please, over there. Who would like, please, microphone here, and let's move the microphones quickly. The aim is to get as many ideas as possible in the next 25 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Maqsood Cruz. I'm the Executive Director of Hidayah, the International Center of Excellence for Countering Violent Extremism. I'm personally a self-declared stubborn optimist, because I believe...
Hang on, say that again. A self-declared stubborn optimist.
Exactly.
I heard you correct, okay.
Yes, you did. Because I think just going into a series of cynicism based on certain understandings or perceptions is problematic in itself. In fact, what I would always advocate is that there is a need at the moment for a certain paradigm shift in our political thinking, diplomatic thinking, and most importantly, security thinking.
Do you think leaders are up to it?
I believe it's not just up to the leaders. If we are truly honest, sincere, and serious about how we counter all kinds of threats and challenges, it requires all of us to be part of the solution.
Thank you. Fine. Good. Who's got the microphone here? Move the microphone around, please. And I'd like to hear from anyone who was at the meeting with the chair last night from the next generation, because actually your voice matters enormously. Don't be put off by the ties and the dark suits.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Robin Shepherd, Senior Advisor, Halifax International Security Forum. I wanted to bounce off what you said about the spirit of the conference, which this introduction is designed to do, and President
It came from Minister Lajčák.
Minister Lajčák, and indeed I've just written down here noting from President Kiška's remarks subsequent to that about fighting corruption and reclaiming our democratic space. And it strikes me that it's very hard for architects of the status quo, such as most of the people in this room are, to be self-critical. There's a temptation to blame the people for the woes of our democracy. And the point that I'd simply like to throw into the discussion is that for think tanks, for journalists, for moderators, and for speakers at this conference, to bear in mind that the great danger here is that we all become passive and rather frustrated observers of a world that is passing us by. And I think the way to avoid that is to engage in a self-critical spirit, which I think has been somewhat absent, certainly in the last 15 or 20 years in Western countries. Greater
self-criticism, over-complacency, looking at yourself.
Looking at collectively at myself included as people in this room, where I think that in the post-Cold War era, almost as a kind of product of the end of history paradigm, there was a thought that except for a technocratic sense of building things, there wasn't an awful lot to talk about, and therefore we kind of missed out on the pluralism that I think has caused a lot of our present-day problems.
Thank you. All right, please, who's got the microphone there? Move the microphone around, please. Jonathan Isle.
Jonathan Isle from the Royal United Services Institute. I'd like to take up your challenge, and the previous speakers sort of continue the argument, take up your challenge about new ideas or indeed new approaches. Last year, you chaired discussions here talking about fake news, about the idea of alternative scenarios. In the year that has passed since the last GLOBSEC, the situation has become much more critical. It is really, at the end of the day, an exercise in trust in governance. And this is what we're facing. And we saw it in ample ways in the Salisbury gas attack, and we saw it in Syria, which the Slovak president mentioned. This fundamental attack against the credibility of people that governs, and the idea that there are no facts, that everything is relative, even the basic facts of what happened, where, and who is culprit. This is eroding our all foundations and everything we stand for. And yes, I agree, we have a very passive, defensive attitude of just shaking our heads.
Keep shaking the cage there, Jonathan, please.
Thank you, Nick. Mario Nicolini, many organizations, but Forum of the World's Religions as well. I'd like to commend yourself and GLOBSEC on this format, because this is really an orchestra of voices coming at the panel rather than from the panel. So great.
It's a quartet only so far. It's not an orchestra yet.
It will be. It will become one.
Okay, you better rise to that.
Religion and security, I think some of those voices that were direly missing in the conversations are the religious leaders. Religion has been and is being weaponized for political and economic gain. Yesterday by terrorists, today by Russia, tomorrow by other autocrats. So we need to get the moderate voices out and promote those as a counterweight to the hostile weaponization of religious narratives.
Do you think moderate voices want to speak?
They do, but there are not enough of them. And so it's up to us to bring them and amplify that voice.
Thank you, please. I'm told some of you are actually writing words, but you're writing essays at the same time. So please, 2 words for the word cloud.
Elena Calistru, gender balance here.
We're working on it.
From Funky Citizens, a Romanian NGO. I'm a cynical idealist, which means that I believe that things are bad, but that we can find solutions. In my opinion, the most important issue with Central and Eastern European countries is that nobody did the proper management of expectations after the end of the Cold War. My parents' generation was promised a lot of things. They were said that it would be amazing, and it wasn't. And they were used to being a generation of sacrifice. But they believed in a brighter future. It's no longer true for my generation. So what I believe we need is to stop over-promising and under-delivering.
All right. I want to keep cracking the whip here, really, to make you think as radically as possible. Please, I'll come to you in a moment. Who's got the microphone further back? Now, gender balance is about women in the audience putting up their hands as well. I can pick on people. There is a woman there. So if there is no gender balance, it's because the genders aren't balanced in putting up their hands at the moment. Who's got the microphone, please?
Hi, Jack Margolin from Center for Advanced Defense Studies. There's been a lot of talk about threats from state actors, from non-state actors like terrorist organizations, but I think it's important to consider the fact that the line between state actors and non-state actors is blurring, and that illicit networks, that would be my contribution to the word cloud, are coming to the fore as the power of states recedes. And I think that's going to continue to be one of the most important trends in global security.
Okay, keep thinking radically, please. Microphone here. Who's got the microphone? It'll come to you in a moment. Who else has got the microphone? Please. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Nick. I'm Brendan Hammer. I'm the Australian Ambassador in Vienna.
Good day.
A lot of accreditations, including to 17 international organisations. So I do a lot of multilateralism. And I talk with a lot of my colleagues in multilateralism, other ambassadors. And let me, first of all, defend what happens in the UN agencies. There's a great deal of very, very important work being done all the time, which is rather unsung. One reason being that the UN doesn't have the money to publicise itself, and people don't like it spending money on publicising itself. But let me add that, yes, there is a lot of stress on the multilateral system, and let me simply say that liberal democratic countries that want a rules-based global order need to spend money on multilateralism. They need to abandon their zero real growth policies towards how they fund international organisations. They need to put more money in and capacity into their international multilateral diplomacy. So this is just a plea. If we want a rules-based global order, liberal democracies have to spend more on multilateral.
Let me just check. Hearing what Jakob said in point 7 about the way Eastern and Central Europe is now, it's now looking very increasingly fragile. Is that what you're reporting from Vienna to Canberra?
No, I think Central Europe's very complex. I think there are a lot of good sides in Central Europe. Certainly, economic growth rates are very, very high. I've been having some conversations with colleagues here about wages growth and wages distribution. Certainly, if people see economic progress, and we've just come out through the last 18 months of a bad economic period into a much better economic period. I think there's a lag. I think the politics in Central Europe will improve, and I think discussions like this and brilliant speeches like the President's speech will help people get over a lot of this. So I'm a bit of an optimist too.
All right, so you're at 5 stars on the chart. Who else has got the microphone? Thank you, Ambassador. Please, down here. Who else wants to get the microphone? Because I can't see any hands going up. Another one here. The lady here still hasn't got the microphone. So can we just wait and get the microphone to that, and the lady behind you?
Thanks a lot. Hanna Shalist, Ukraine Analytica. I would raise the question like, is Helsinki dead? Or do the Helsinki Final Act principles are still relevant in the current conditions, especially for the last 4 years? Not only territorial integrity, but all that great peace order from Vancouver to Vladivostok. Can we still speak about the zone of security and stability that big and that long? Or is it a fragmentation both in the values, principles, and the territory of security?
Well, let me do a quick hands up here. Is Helsinki dead? Is it faltering? Who believes that Helsinki is still functioning in spirit and reality? Any hands going up, please? I haven't given you much advance warning on that, but I might come to you later then. Please, you think it, the ambassador thinks it is. Anyone else? How many people are pessimistic about Helsinki now, particularly with what's happening in security terms? Okay. I've got a bit of mobilizing to do here. Who's the lady at the back, please?
So I just have a word. My name is Christina. I'm participating in the Global Young Leaders Forum. And you asked for a word to contribute to the word cloud. I don't have a radical one. I would say climate change, which I think we're not speaking about enough. It's just become one of those issues that has been around for quite a few years now. But it's just something that people like to keep sweeping under the carpet or is ignoring entirely, as we've seen recently.
All right, well, you mentioned the word cloud. Let's just put it up and see what it's showing at the moment. This is not in any way to be prescriptive so that all of you decide to follow these words, but those are the words which are emerging at the moment, led, I guess, by artificial intelligence. I think the artificial and intelligence are meant to be one. Poverty, Russia, and climate. More to come on that. Keep punching your keyboard, please, if you haven't yet. Please do. Please, down here.
Well, my name is Dilawar Alauddin. I'm from the Middle East Research Institute, MERI, based in Erbil, Kurdistan region of Iraq. I really wanted to comment on a buzzword that has not been mentioned, and that's really leadership, or lack of it. When it comes to facing crisis or providing sense of optimism for the long-term future, or containing all these, or rescuing Helsinki or Geneva or whatever crisis management initiatives, is all about having vision translated into roadmaps with concerted efforts and cutting milestones and delivering on them. At the moment, the way Europe is structured, the way Europe is dealing with its foreign policy, or the way that member states are having their diverse approaches, it's difficult to see how Europe can face those challenges without actually doing something about the ability to provide leadership rather than waiting for the superpowers, the other global powers to come to the fore and tackle issues. And that we can see that the United States, Russia and others are not doing it for Europe, and Europe is in crisis, and its neighborhood is in crisis, Middle East is in crisis, but Europe is not able to provide the leadership to tackle those and fill that gap.
All right, thank you. I'm going to take the liberty. I'm actually involved in a major project called Thinking the Unthinkable about the struggle leaders have. We've got enormous numbers of interviews, and all of them are indicating they're scared and overwhelmed by what is happening, even if they are ex officio in post. Our book comes out this week, and it's a worrying sign because it's all very well talking about systems. It's the people who have to do it who are struggling at the moment and are worried about the existential threat to governments, governance, and the corporates. Who's got the microphone, please? And the lady here will come next.
I'm Milo Jones. I teach at IE Business School, Geopolitics and Intelligence Analysis. I absolutely accept that authoritarian actors are malign and, in fact, have been besieging democracy, as was said. But I think what we need to do is understand the enormous weakness of these systems and the brittleness of them. I fear Russian weakness and Chinese weakness far more than I fear Russian strength and Chinese strength. Because if you think you have problems now, wait until you have an 11 time zone Yugoslavia with nukes.
Thank you. Okay, I haven't forgotten you. I'm trying to get the microphone in your direction. Please, here.
Hello, I'm James Sproul from the Gotham Institute in London. I'm actually quite an optimist, and one of the reasons that I'm optimistic...
How many stars, James?
At least 4 to 5.
Okay.
Yeah. And the reason I'm a big optimist is because I think actually power is increasingly going down to people. Which of us have seen big business or new business ideas coming from big businesses? Actually, they're coming from small businesses. And this creates an enormous pressure on governments because they can't control it in the way they did before. They can't just meet big businessmen. They've got to actually meet small businessmen, entrepreneurs, and put in place the sorts of structures that encourage that entrepreneurship. We've seen that again and again coming through, and the gentleman...
And I'll just press you. You were until recently the chief economist of the IOD in London. What about the generational profile of where this new business is coming from? Age profile?
It's very often... It's not typically the 20-year-old or 25-year-old in a garage and in the back shed of their garden, but it is probably somebody in 35-year-old who's had a bit of experience and then goes off and thinks, I can do this better than my present.
Do they do it well?
I think very often they do. But one of the things we see certainly in Central and Eastern Europe is that there's not as much entrepreneurship as we would like. There's a lot in the Baltics, but not as much in this part of the world. And I think that's a real problem.
Thank you very much indeed. Please, have you got the microphone now? Do you have the microphone? Please, can you move the microphone quickly when I point in at someone? Thank you, to save time. Has anyone else got the microphone quickly?
Yeah.
You have a, but I'll go to the lady first because I'm conscious of gender balance.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm a depressed optimist from Sarajevo.
A depressed optimist?
Yes, from Bosnia and Herzegovina, isn't it?
Okay, how many stars is a depressed optimist?
5.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yes, indeed. This is my contribution to the brainstorming in the neighboring region, which is the Balkans. We have a number of crisis management, so to say, interventions that threaten, and peace processes that threaten to become permanent conditions, unstable permanent conditions, which could potentially become a source of instability. Let's maybe discuss this.
Thank you very much. Please, who else wants the microphone as well?
Good afternoon. My name is Abdul Hakim Ajijola. I'm a member of the Global Commission for the Stability of Cyberspace. I think a big underrated challenge for somebody like me from the Global South is really how do we address the rights, digital and other rights, of those who are not actually represented here. And there are 2 particular groups I have in mind. The future generations, those who are not yet born. How do we establish the precedents that actually will evolve into some kind of norms that they will have to live with? And then the second group, from where I come from also, are the unconnected. And again, many of these are women. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And you said you're from?
Nigeria, but the Global Commission on the Stability of Cyberspace.
Because there is a lot of evidence now about the power of women in the digitally connected communities now.
True.
So it is moving significantly.
I don't know about significantly, but it is moving.
Okay, I think the UNDP and you...
needs a little more...
Who else would like to come in, please? Yes, the gentleman there. I'm conscious of the bias in the age profile at the moment, if I can put it like that. So it's up to you to decide. I can pick on people, maybe.
I'm Peter Osuski, member of Slovak Parliament. And what I would declare about myself, I am melancholic optimist. That means...
what, how many stars
Obama said yes.
Hang on, how many stars is that?
I would say 4.5.
Okay.
Obama said yes, we can. I am melancholic, and that's why I'm saying yes, we could. And that's the difference, because we are somehow used to declare our weakness as a soft attitude to solving problems. And we are rich enough and powerful enough and technically developed enough to be stronger, but we somehow prefer to declare the weakness as a power.
Thank you. Keep the microphone for a moment. Is anyone else wanting to come in, please? You've got 5 minutes. We're over here. I'm just going to ask you, before you leave the microphone, given what the President said about what happened after the murder of the journalist and his fiancée, how would you say as a parliamentarian that Slovakia has handled the challenge to leadership? Obviously there's the election and so on, but in terms of the change of mentality, I first came here during the darker times of Czechoslovakia, but in 1 minute, could you?
It was difficult to handle it because the nation rose up and the whole movement that started by the murder was more in hand of citizens, and the politicians even had been declaring that they are involved as a citizen, but not organizing this wave.
I'm picking up this point about leadership, which came at the front here.
And
how have you changed as leaders and politicians, do you think, because of that?
No, of course, there was a dramatic change concerning the ruling power, the main party, but as I said, it was a result of fear, because never since Velvet Revolution so many people came with so clear idea of changing the way how we are doing.
Thank you. Please, you've got the microphone.
Thank you, finally. I would see myself as an optimistic pessimist. I prepare for the worst and I hope for the best. At the same time, I hope that my pessimism is self-defeating and my optimism is self-fulfilling. The topic I would like to bring is the future of work. And we've seen that technology has traditionally shaped the way how societies are organized. And I have a sense that our society right now is at a tremendous transition, and we don't really have any answers of how the technology is going to shape the work, and how do we actually respond with people potentially being out of jobs, but not being able to be retrained, but facing rather the fate of horses when the steam engine took their jobs.
Do you think those at the top realize how profound this challenge is?
Sorry, once again?
Do you think those at the top realize how profound this structural challenge is?
No, absolutely not. And that's what I see as the biggest problem, that potentially this could completely disintegrate our society, split it into a 1 or 2% of people who create a bubble, safety structure in themselves, ring-fast from the rest of the society, and a very dystopic rest of the society.
Right, thank you very much. Anyone else, please? Please, right at the back.
Good afternoon, Ben Hoffman from Australia. I'm part of the Global Young Leaders Forum also, part of the cyber working group. And this morning we heard in in the interest of transparency, I guess I identify as a realistic idealist. We heard in a briefing this morning about cyber that it is the 5th sphere of warfare, and yet we've moved past the 4th already of space, outer space. We have to deal with cyber now because we're living with it now and the problems that come with it. And yet I think if we're looking at future agenda items, then it's going to be outer space and the issues that we face with that.
Thank you very much indeed. Anyone else, please? Lady here. General Allen, John Allen, we've known you here as a military commander, but could I come to you in a moment? Because you and I have had a conversation briefly. You're now president of Brookings for the last 7 months. You've got to recalibrate how an institution can handle these challenges. If I can just ask you for 90 seconds on how much of this is really being considered in an enormous organization like Brookings. If we can get the microphone to General Allen, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Pia Rantala-Engberg, and I'm the cyber ambassador in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Helsinki, Finland. Actually, I would like to pick up the point actually made the previous speaker here. I think what we really need to pay attention to is this cyber agenda as a whole, and we have to demystify the issue. It is part of foreign and security and defense policy. Really, it's a core issue. It's not a technical issue, and we need to. Already, the Vice President of the GLOBSEC also referred to the fact that we need to look at the international law and norms. We need to concentrate on human rights. We need to see how capacity building in the developing countries is done. We need to look at the cybercrime. You know, it's really the overall agenda of foreign and security policy we need to really get more engaged to.
Do you think there's a willingness to do that or not?
Not enough.
Okay.
We have to work.
Right. We had a no there and a not enough here. Quickly, John Allen, President of Brookings.
Nick, this is a really important moment, I think, for think tanks in any case, in the post-truth society or the post-truth world that we live in, where everyone has their own facts, everyone has their own opinions, everyone is affected by alternative facts and the influence operations that constantly buffet our societies, our regular societies. In the context of Brookings, what I intend to do is to pivot the organization to that as an organization which will base its research on big data analysis henceforth. We'll still do this traditional scholarship in the 5 verticals of Brookings, which is economic studies, metro, governance and technology, global development, and foreign policy and defense. But we're going to base this on big data analytics. And big data analytics requires massive amounts of computing. It requires access to data and to data sets. And we're going to work on that very hard in order for the products that we produce at Brookings to ultimately be as close to the accurate truth as we possibly can. Because outfits like think tanks have an enormous policy responsibility today in ways we've not seen in a long time.
So you're trying to get ahead of the curve?
Well, absolutely. The other platform capability that we're bringing to Brookings is an orientation on artificial intelligence and emerging technologies. If you're going to write at Brookings, you must tell me where artificial intelligence and emerging technologies will touch that sector of your research today and in the future, because that's the direction we're heading.
Thank you very much, John. Right, let's go now to the word cloud. And I think that's going, although it's changed since we last looked at it. Wow, I'm not sure quite how we now distill that, but you can get out your iPhones or your whatever machine you're using and make what you can of that. Artificial is now stuck here for some reason. You can see the problem. Yeah, but it is artificial intelligence, but it is about migration, inequality, and climate. And I'm very struck by what we've heard from 2 or 3 of you about the system really in place not being able to handle this, and those at the top not being able to handle it. Dehumanization of conflicts, that's a push on 3 words rather than 2 words. Climate and migration. That is a grab of the kind of things that are on your mind, statistically insignificant, but certainly in terms of impression, important for you to take away for the next 2 days. Now, what I'd like you to do is also think of, there's a questionnaire, because as we've heard from Jakub, GLOBSEC is about now building forward, understanding what you think of megatrends. So see that as something to do off your app. In the next day or 2, and it's vital because to meet the kind of aspirations that Brookings and others have, it is about understanding as well which way the megatrends are moving and whether universities and think tanks and others like GLOBSEC can be ahead rather than behind the curve. So I leave it there. You've already had lunch, I assume. There's coffee now, an early coffee, and for the next half an hour until 13:45. In here, there'll be the critical relationship between the West and Russia, and upstairs, the role of artificial intelligence in conflict. So there's someone addressing what I think, John, you're involved in that. So thank you very much indeed. And thank you all, whether you're a pessimist, optimist, idealist, or whatever. Thank you.